Back in the days of survival horror games, we've had games the likes of Resident Evil, Alone in the Dark, and you name it. And one of the other games that came alongside is Silent Hill, which was released in '99. It began development in 1996, before finally making a release in 1999 for the PS1 as an exclusive, from Team Silent, being the first game in the Team Silent's development history. Silent Hill was basically similar to some of the other games that you probably had played, which did things a lot of things differently and most uncommonly things that has never been done for any of the survival horror games on the PS1 at the time. During that point, we've had games that use pre-rendered backgrounds like Final Fantasy, Resident Evil, and you name it. But in other cases, this would not use any sort of pre-rendered backgrounds at all. Instead, everything is a full-blown polygon model. The town, buildings, the enemies, the items, and you name it. Everything was a polygon. And it can be proven that you can put polygons and full-blown 3D models in a game like this without having any problems. The thing is that the fog was the biggest thing in a game changer for the survival horror elements. They used it to basically make sure that the game runs pretty well, but at the same time it adds some sort of atmosphere to the whole entire experience, because at times you just don't know where you're going, unless if you look into your map, of course. So you play as Harry Mason, and you're looking for your daughter after some sort of car crash. And now you have to look for... Then you gotta find the daughter, get yourself a steel pipe, a pistol, and a radio to equip yourself with. The radio was basically used to locate enemies. What I mean is that if there's an enemy that's nearby, the radio will make a noise, and this indicates the enemy is coming towards you. A monster like dog, a flying gargoyle like, and a bunch of other creatures. This game also prevents any sort of limitations in the inventory system, so it doesn't mean that your inventory is going to be limited, because it's not. And this has been carried on with the past 3 games. And yes, I said 3 games because the 4th game decided to ruin everything with the inventory. When the game was given some coverage, the game's PlayStation Magazine cover claims that this game is more than a Resident Evil clone, and that state is, well, pretty much true. Sure, there are similarities. They're using a joystick or D-pad to run and walk, but there's also sidestepping, which was pretty cool for the time. But I think that was the only Silent Hill, or at least a survival horror game I can think of that sidesteps. Yeah, there were Resident Evil games that use quick turning, but I don't ever recall any sort of sidestepping. You have to look for health items, ammo, and such in this game. Now, other weapons like a rifle and a shotgun have rare ammo, and I highly recommend you guys use them if you're going to use them for bosses. That's the only recommendation I have for you. Because if you use it on regular enemies and you waste all the good ammo on, well, non-threatening or at least just weaker enemies, then making the bosses fight you is going to be a little harder for you, at least. And this just depends on the routes you're going to go, because this game does have multiple different endings depending on what you do in the game. And just like any other survival horror game, this is one of the games that relies on you, well, solving puzzles, of course. But it wasn't until the second game in the series that would introduce a puzzle difficulty level. But this one only includes just a difficulty for the base game, and that's it. Doesn't really make any sort of difference on which difficulty you do. It's just more of the action way. So yeah, when the game first came out, it received positive reception and even was the runner-up for innovation of gameplay, but it lost. Which is not a surprise, because why else would there be a game that innovates but that doesn't win? I don't understand this. Now, to make things a little bit more different, I've already mentioned that they have the fog, 3D rendered textures. What makes things a lot differently than any other survival horror game that I've played is that if you have the DualShock controller with the vibration enabled, you can pretty much tell what type of condition you have for your health. If you have like a yellow health, then it's going to give you a rumble. But if it's starting to turn red, it's going to give you a strong but a pretty fast rumble functionality, which is pretty innovative and something quite different that you probably have never seen before. At the time as well, unlike Resident Evil, you don't need any sort of like ink ribbons or anything to make saves. You can save the game at any given time by finding a red flyer or a red square in certain areas in the game. It could be inside the building, outside the building. I mean, that's really where you can find all these things. Sometimes it might be next to a puzzle of the next room, or perhaps some sort of safe room that you can stay and look for items. You're gonna want to find some of these items throughout town before wanting to progress. I say this because there are gonna be times where you might actually miss something and not realize it. Given how large that the town can be, it's been split into 3 different sections, so you best watch out. Especially with some different mutations of the same enemy, which they can be a bit powerful. The only thing is that, again, I've seen people talk about Silent Hill F having the worst melee combat when it's not true. If you guys play this game, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, because the melee combat is not that great. I try using the steel pipe. Sometimes I can never land on the enemy, maybe because of the speed. But again, I can never hit anyone, so I'm always relying on the pistol. Doesn't matter anyway, because you're going to be finding tons of pistol ammo regardless, which is pretty good. You're also going to want to make sure the enemies aren't alive, which you can actually stomp on the enemies to make sure that they're like not playing dead. And again, that's a good thing. But yeah, with the steel pipe and all, you could do a light attack or a heavy attack. But there's other variations of weapons you can find throughout the game. And also, if wondering, yes, you can actually beat the game with a melee weapon only. There are challenges that has proven it. And despite the system seemingly being pushed to its limits, everything in terms of like alternative endings, different sort of cutscenes you can find, different items to unlock and such, are all contained in one disc. Unlike Resident Evil 2, which is just more of a character disc, and also Alone in the Dark: A New Nightmare, which contains in 2 discs. So there are a lot of different variations of this game that has been done, unlike its competitors beforehand. Even if they did fail, they still try to find a way to do something different. But this one takes a whole new level of having something different around here. But yeah, you'll meet characters throughout the entirety of the game in different places. Sometimes they'll act normal or strange. I mean, this game has disturbing imagery, as is pretty much disclaimed in terms of the game itself, in the entirety of the series, and this one has pretty much proven it. Look, if you guys are suffering from mental health, I don't recommend the game, just for your safety, but it's just something I just want to warn about, because there are guys out there that are struggling through that sort of stuff. And I also say throughout the entirety of the series, because they actually do say this in every part of the game that's in front, before you even go to the main menu. But for this game too, this is another Konami game that has sometimes bad voice acting. I'm not making this up. Sometimes it just sounds like they're reading off a paper, which, I mean, to be fair, voice acting in video games were new, but movies is a completely different story. You'd think they would have taken it from the same energy, but don't worry about the voice acting in this game. It's nothing comparable to Resident Evil 1, which had hilariously bad voice acting and memorable at best. Worst. But don't worry, if those things are off-putting to you guys, then I do got some good news for you guys. In case you guys aren't aware, this game is in fact getting a remake of the original game itself, made from the same team who also did the Silent Hill 2 remake, which actually did pretty well in terms of reviews, and sales as well. So once again, if you guys ever get lost, use the map. But another news is that if you meet some sort of dead end, sometimes there might be items there, but other times you can also have them automatically marked in your map so you know that that way is a dead end. But there's also marks where you should be able to find key items in order to meet your next objective, so you know exactly where you're going. I would read through some of the papers that you find and clues. That way they'll help you basically keep track on where you need to go next. And there's also optional places like the convenience store and the police station. I would still go there just so you can get the items that you'll possibly need in order to protect yourself for your next adventure. And after beating the game, depending on the star rank, you'll also unlock additional items for your next, playthrough, in terms of something of a New Game Plus, which is, I think that's supposed to be it. They call it the Next Sphere, but it's more like a New Game Plus mechanic, which is, I gotta say, is ahead of its time for some of the games, because not many games back then were common in terms of New Game Plus. The only game I can think of is Metal Gear Solid, which is another Konami game. Fun fact too, there was also a Left 4 Dead community-made map of Silent Hill. The only negative was that it lacked checkpoints, and it was one of the longest maps that has ever been made. But if you guys are ever interested in playing the game, then if it's not already released on, the classic version of the game, the only way to get this is on the PS3 or the PSP. And I say that because that's the only cheapest route to take. I don't know if they'll ever bring it to the emulation of the PlayStation 4 or 5, but I can say for a fact a remake will be coming out within a couple of years. I don't know exactly when, but it is developed as of speaking, so it's in development and it will come out at some point soon. So if you guys are ever curious to try the game, then by all means go ahead and see what you can do in this one. Don't expect anything to be easy in this game, because this game can be punishing at times, so best keep your guard up. And better listen to that radio, because that can help you too.